So today I had 3 separate subjects I could have chosen for today's video. The first was Scotland imposing a minimum price per unit of alcohol. Congratulations Scotland, you've essentially forced any and all alcohol drinkers across the border. The other was a video I saw on the House of Lords YouTube channel about lifetime peerages, which I might yet do for tomorrow. But the subject of today's video and the winner of this little 3-way contest comes from the University of Texas, that has decided to treat masculinity as a mental health issue. It's a very good title. It certainly had me hooked. It's nice to know that in what I have later discovered to be a very liberal area of Texas, they've taken masculinity and some of the old traits. I say old traits because what are more commonly considered to be gender roles don't really apply so much these days in somewhat more developed areas. Let's go with the more liberal areas, rendering this whole idea moot, really, doesn't it? The Counseling and Mental Health Center at the University of Texas at Austin recently launched a new program to help male students take control over their gender identity and develop a healthy sense of masculinity. So a couple of things come to mind. Firstly, what are the parameters for a healthy sense of masculinity? What is considered to be healthy by the University of Texas's Mental Health Center? And also, if people are somewhat certain of their gender identity, and it is something that's considered, let's go with, toxic, because it's a very commonly used buzzword for certain types of masculinity, will that be encouraged so that they can be who they are, or will it be encouraged to be suppressed? Treating masculinity as if it were a mental health crisis, MasculinUT is organised by the school's counselling staff, and most recently organised a poster series encouraging students to develop a healthy model of masculinity. I love that on this article page there is a "Are you an alpha or a beta male? Take our 20-question quiz and find out." I might come back to this later, or leave a link to it in the description so that all of you can tell me in the comments whether you are alpha or beta. Not that, and to be clear, not that there is anything wrong with either being an alpha male or a beta male. There are other words that can be associated with either. Those are the problematic parts. The program is predicated on a critique of so-called restrictive masculinity. Men, the program argues, suffer when they are told to act like a man. Isn't this like a 2015 feminist argument? Like when men are told to simply suck it up? I am not now going to refute that as an argument, as I was raised in that particular way. You know, the old-fashioned way of simply get over it, princess mentality, stiff upper lip. Or when they are encouraged to fulfill traditional gender roles, such as being successful or the breadwinner. Not that either are a bad thing. There is nothing wrong with being successful or, in your family, the breadwinner. Another thing you have to consider here, if you have a family and children, and want to try and raise your children, let's go with the word well, so that they are somewhat balanced, in that they get to spend time with both parents, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a family that doesn't have one person that is the breadwinner. And yes, just because it's typically men doesn't mean that's a bad thing, and success is a subjective term. Let's go with that. We are prone to setting our own challenges to try and achieve something. I think that's a good thing. I know a number of creators, for example, that measure success on whether they've got a silver play button or a gold play button and so on. I personally regard them as a challenge. I like challenges, but I don't believe the measure of someone's success is on that. I think it's more on personal choices, personal decisions, personal parameters. But for now, let's play along and say gender roles. Though you might enjoy taking care of people or being active, MasculinUT warns that many of these attributes are actually dangerous, claiming that traditional ideas of masculinity place men into rigid boxes, which prevent them from developing their emotional maturity. Okay, so I don't actually know what restrictive masculinity is, so I think we should have a little look on the link that's referenced in the article. Voices Against Violence imagines a campus where compassion, understanding, empathy, inclusion, and respect are guiding values for students to develop their own sense of masculine identity. Healthy masculinities include many behaviors rather than one singular idea of masculinity. However, the reality many young men on campus face is to act like a man, as if there was only one true way. Well, for example, Restrictive notions of masculinity imagine a single rigid identity that emphasizes aggression, competition with men, devaluation of women, and a few tools to develop communication skills or emotional maturity. So let's have a look at this little image down here. Men are breadwinners, violent, mean, bullies, tough, angry, active, strong, successful, in control over women. Men have no emotions, stand up for themselves, yell at people, pebble, can take it. Don't make mistakes. Well, you know a man didn't write this then. Don't cry, take charge, push people around, know about sex, don't back down, take care of people. Feelings: confused, angry, scared, ashamed, alone, stupid, powerless, vulnerable, revenge, hopeless, worthless. You left out amazing. Now, some of the claims about patterns of restrictive masculinity, I'm not going to argue that image, by the way. I think it's fantastic, especially the pebble bit. 1. Restrictive masculinity is taken for granted and is often expected of male and male-identified students. The harm that this can cause to self or reluctance to seek out help and harm against others. I noticed I read in and out of the brackets there, that was nice. Is often ignored or condoned by believing that boys will be boys. I don't know any places that still use that type of language. Maybe this is an American thing. Unhealthy masculinity can restrict the emotional development of students. See, I like this argument because it shows, and I don't want to use the term narrow-minded, but it's predicated on the assumption that for someone to be mentally healthy, they have to have a somewhat expressive existence, or be in tune with a whole variety of emotions to be considered healthy masculine. I would like to believe that I, to an extent, buck this trend. I don't show much emotion on YouTube or away from the keyboard, because I don't particularly care. There is a complete lack of empathy. So I think how you determine healthy masculinity is entirely subjective. It is very much based on the individual. And I'm okay with people treating individual people differently if you notice that maybe they would be better or more stable if they were more in tune with their emotions. But pushing the idea that healthy masculinity would mean not being in tune with your emotions as a bad thing, I think is poor, because let's face it, it does not work for everyone. Exhibit A is stood right in front of you wearing this beautiful brown suit. 3. Unhealthy masculinity works by excluding students who are judged not to measure up to the values of real men. Well, we do create groups based on types of masculinity, if you hadn't noticed. Yes, there are jocks, yes, there are geeks, and yes, there are other types of people who fit in between those. This is especially pronounced in the exclusion of feminine gender expressions, gay, bisexual, and queer men, and gender-expansive students. Just because a group of men exists and is somewhat exclusionary towards other groups doesn't mean for a second, though, that those people are not welcome, or that those people, if they created their own groups, would welcome jocks. You humans are very tribalist. There's no denying this. Exhibit A, the perfect example, would be prisons, where people do divide themselves up by race. It's quite astonishing, really. People feel more comfortable around people they think can understand them. And yes, this does breed very different types of men and women, of course, but that's a good thing, isn't it? To be inclusive towards all types of people. 4. To prove who is a real man means proving who is not a real man. Subjective. This can take the shape of competition between men. Well, competition is good fun. I mean, who doesn't actually like competing with other people to see who's better? There is nothing greater than taking your victory and rubbing it in the faces of all them losers. 5. Unhealthy masculinity works to exclude any femininity from a masculine identity. And now we know what the parameters are for what is unhealthy. Basically, blokes. Then again, as we become more progressive, I would like to believe that even blokes have started to adopt certain traits that are considered or were considered feminine. Certain types of hygiene, for example, how men present themselves. I mean, I've actually met guys that obsess over selfies that sound like blokes and look like blokes, act like jocks. Very vain. Maybe that's not a feminine trait, maybe that's just a dickhead trait. Doesn't matter. We now know what the unhealthy masculinity is, and we must stamp it out, because, as we've discovered, even if there are groups for women and there are groups for men, the women need to exist in the men's space as well, but not the other way round. Yeah. The program is currently without leadership, but not for long. Yay. The school is in a process of hiring a healthy masculinities coordinator to run the program, and a school official tells PJ Media, where this article comes from, that some hopeful hirees are interviewing for the position later this week. I would put money, honestly, I will put money on this, that they hire a woman. A very feminine one at that. And let's take it a bit further and say that that woman will be a feminist. Because as you know, the only people that can truly understand masculinity are women. I do want to finish up this article, and then I want to show you something else. While many schools now have similar programs, this appears to be the first run directly out of a counselling and mental health centre, though the school seems to justify this by claiming that masculinity can cause men to lash out at other people and themselves. The school did not respond to a request for comment to clarify the assertion. You don't make claims like that without proof, ladies and gentlemen. I guess. There is no evidence that masculinity itself contributes to violence. Domestic violence stats would certainly support that. Universities that run similar programs such as UNC Chapel Hill and Northwestern have admitted that their programming isn't supported by any evidence. But if enough people feel it, then of course it must be true, right? Now to finish this video, I have taken the liberty of conducting that little alpha or beta male test. I got 17 out of 20. You are all welcome. Apparently, I am alpha as fuck. So with that, bombshell. I hope everyone has a lovely day. Thank you all for listening.
Omegon, I'm going to batter your prostate.
Imagine my shock